You're not welcome here anymore. Melissa's voice cracked like a whip in the middle of my mother's living room. It wasn't just the words, it was the way she threw them at me, like she'd been saving them up, waiting for the perfect moment to humiliate me. The lace curtains were drawn tight against the Ohio winter light, turning the whole room into this suffocating, yellowish glow. Everyone was there. Mom on the plaid recliner, her hands folded tight in her lap. Uncle Ray leaning against the wall, pretending to check his phone. Melissa's husband, Steve, sprawled on the couch with that smug half-smile he always wore when I was the one in the hot seat. And me, standing there with my coat still buttoned, because I'd only arrived 20 minutes ago, expecting to talk about Dad, about his will. I could feel the heat climbing up my neck, my ears going hot. All I had said was, "Where's Dad's will?" That's it. 6 words. Melissa's eyes had narrowed, just a fraction. Then she laughed short, sharp, humorless. "Why would you ask that?" I shrugged. "Because it's been 6 months and nobody's mentioned it. We should, I don't know, read it?" The air shifted. Mom stopped fiddling with the tissue in her hands. Steve stopped scrolling. Uncle Ray looked up from his phone. And then Melissa stood. The chair scraped against the hardwood floor. "You're not welcome here anymore," she said, each word like a nail in the door she was slamming shut. I laughed not because it was funny, but because I couldn't quite process what was happening. "What?" "You heard me," she said. Her voice had that edge, the one she used in high school, when she wanted to make sure everyone knew she was in control. "If all you're here for is to stir up trouble, you can leave." Trouble. That's what she called asking about Dad's will. Trouble. Dad, who I sat with through every chemo session. Dad, who trusted me with his passwords, his bills, his stupid ancient flip phone. Dad, who used to tell me, "Emma, you're the only one I can count on to do the right thing." I looked at Mom. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I looked at Uncle Ray. He shifted uncomfortably, then looked back at his phone like it had urgent breaking news. And in that silence, I realized something that made my stomach drop. They'd all known this was coming. This wasn't just Melissa losing her temper. This was planned. A family ambush. I unbuttoned my coat slowly, just to buy myself a few seconds, to see if anyone would speak up. No one did. Not Mom, not Uncle Ray, not even Steve, who for once in his life looked like he might be holding his tongue. So I said, "Okay, if that's how it is." I reached into my bag, pulled out the manila folder I'd brought bank statements, property tax records, proof of the payments I'd been making for 8 years straight to keep this very house from sliding into foreclosure. I dropped it on the coffee table. "That's the last payment you'll see from me," I said. My voice was shaking, but I didn't care. "You want me gone? Fine, I'm gone, but so is my money." Melissa's lips pressed into a thin line. Mom let out this tiny, almost imperceptible gasp like she hadn't thought through what kicking me out actually meant. I walked to the door, every step echoing in that too small room. My boots hit the entryway tile. My hand found the doorknob. And that's when I heard Melissa's voice again, dripping with that sugar-coated venom she'd perfected. "Don't come crawling back when you realize you made a mistake." I didn't even turn around. "You first," I said, and then the cold Ohio air hit my face like a slap. The walk to my car felt longer than it should have. Snow crunched under my boots, the kind that squeaks when it's dry and bitterly cold. My breath clouded in the air, white against the gray February sky. I unlocked the car, slid into the driver's seat, and just sat there for a moment, hands gripping the wheel, staring at the peeling paint on the garage door. It wasn't just the humiliation. It was the betrayal, the sharp, almost surgical precision of it. The way they'd all looked away, like if they didn't make eye contact, they could pretend they weren't complicit. I started the engine, the heater groaning to life. The radio came on mid-song, something soft, acoustic, completely at odds with the adrenaline still pounding through my veins. I turned it off. On the drive back to Columbus, I replayed it all in my head, over and over, like maybe if I examined it from every angle, I could find a version where I'd misunderstood, where Melissa hadn't actually meant it. But no matter how I twisted it, the truth was the same. I'd been cut out. Not just from the conversation about Dad's will, but from the family itself. And here's the thing, I didn't even cry. Not then, not that night, maybe because deep down I'd been expecting it. Maybe because part of me had been waiting for an excuse to stop being their safety net. What I didn't expect? 3 days later, my phone would light up at 2:17 a.m., Melissa's name flashing on the screen. And her voice, the same one that told me I wasn't welcome, would be trembling, almost breaking, as she said, "Emma, we need to talk. We can't cover the property tax. Please. We need your help." 6 months. That's how long it had been since Dad's funeral. Half a year of sorting through probate paperwork, condolence cards that stopped coming after week 3, and the kind of empty Sunday afternoons that felt heavier than grief itself. I'd thrown myself into work 12-hour shifts at the hospital, double time when someone called out, because patients in the ER don't care if your family just imploded. They bleed, they crash, they stop breathing, and you're there, hand steady, heart steady, because that's what you do. That's what I do. My apartment in Columbus was quiet, clean, predictable. Not like the old house. 2 hours away. Where I grew up, the house Dad built with overtime pay and stubborn pride. The house with the sagging porch and the creaky third step that everyone pretended not to notice. Mom still lived there, technically, but in reality it was Melissa's kingdom now. Melissa, 2 years older, always the organized one, the one who stayed close to take care of Mom. Except staying close somehow meant quitting her job at the insurance agency, letting her husband Steve pick up part-time construction gigs when he felt like it, and managing the household while I sent money every month to cover the bills. When Dad was alive, he tried to keep things even. He'd tell me, "You're helping Em, but make sure you're helping yourself too." But after the cancer took him, something shifted. Calls from Melissa weren't about checking in anymore. They were about the electric bill's late again, or Mom's prescriptions are so expensive this month. Always urgent. Always just a little short. Then came the text, not from Mom, not from Melissa, but from Uncle Ray of all people. "Family meeting tomorrow. At the house. 2 p.m. No explanation. No agenda. No heads up until the night before." I stared at the message, thumb hovering over the keyboard. I typed, "What's the meeting about?" Deleted it. Typed, "Is Mom okay?" Deleted that too. Because I already knew the answer. If Mom were in the hospital, Melissa would have made sure I was the last to know. If it were good news, there wouldn't be a meeting. So I packed a folder with every receipt, every bank statement, every proof of payment I'd been dumb enough to keep organized, and I made the drive to my old hometown. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The porch sagged more. There were plastic Adirondack chairs in the yard, faded from the sun, and a rusted grill that hadn't been used since Dad got too sick to stand outside for long. I stepped inside, the familiar scent hitting me: coffee, pine sol, and something faintly musty, like the air had been shut up too long. Mom was in her recliner, knitting something in a pale yellow yarn, her glasses low on her nose. Steve was on the couch, one arm slung over the back, scrolling on his phone like the couch belonged to him more than the house did. Melissa was in the kitchen, her laugh carrying into the living room. She was talking to Aunt Linda about summer BBQ plans, ribs, potato salad, maybe even a rented bounce house for the kids. I stood there in the doorway for a full minute, coat still on, bag in my hand. Nobody stopped their conversation to greet me. Nobody said, "Hey Em, glad you could make it." It was like I'd walked into a party I hadn't been invited to. "Emma," Mom finally said, without looking up from her knitting, "you made it." "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "What's the meeting about?" She shrugged, her needles clicking. "We'll get to it." I sat on the arm of the love seat, the only spot that wasn't covered in throw blankets or Melissa's tote bags. Steve glanced up briefly, nodded, then went back to his phone. The small talk kept rolling, Melissa and Aunt Linda reminiscing about last summer's BBQ, the one I'd missed because I was working a double shift during a staffing crisis. They were laughing about how the neighbor's dog stole a whole rack of ribs off the grill, like it was some fond family memory. Nobody asked me how work was. Nobody mentioned the hours I'd covered so Mom could get her roof repaired after last winter's ice storm. Nobody even looked at me long enough to see I'd cut my hair. It was all smiles and chuckles and remember when, but underneath the air was tight. Like everyone was keeping one eye on a clock I couldn't see. That's when I knew. This wasn't a meeting, this was a setup. I crossed my legs, leaned back, and watched them talk. Filing away every detail the way Aunt Linda kept glancing toward Melissa, the way Steve smirked without ever looking up from his phone, the way Mom's knitting needles moved faster whenever there was a lull in conversation. They were waiting for something. I just didn't know yet that something was me. If there's one thing my family's good at, it's pretending money just appears. For as long as I can remember, I've been the one quietly making sure the lights stayed on in that old house. The first time was when I was 24. Dad had slipped on the ice, missed 2 weeks of work, and the property tax bill came in red stamped. Melissa called me crying, saying Mom couldn't handle that kind of stress. I wired the money before I even had time to think about how much it would set me back. That's how it started. Over the years, the amounts got bigger. Roof repairs after a hailstorm, a new furnace one bitter January, medical copays when Mom's blood pressure meds doubled in price. Every time, Melissa would phrase it like it was some kind of joint effort. We're all pitching in, except we meant me. On paper, Melissa was the one taking care of Mom, living in the house, making the grocery runs, driving her to doctor appointments. But I knew better. I'd hear the stories from neighbors, see the Facebook check-ins from the nail salon at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday, or the week-long girls' trips she'd take with her friends while Steve was between jobs. Mom would defend her. She's here, Emma. That's worth something. And I'd bite my tongue, because what's the point of arguing with a woman who's already chosen her favorite? Melissa has always been the golden child. Growing up, it was little things she got. The bigger bedroom, the new bike, the praise for helping Dad in the yard while I was told to go play. As adults, it became something else entirely. She got the benefit of the doubt, the free pass, the blind trust. I got the responsibility. And the thing is, I played along. For years. Because I had a steady job. Because I wasn't raising kids. Because you're doing so well, Em. As if doing well meant I had to bankroll everyone else's version of stability. When Dad got sick, the imbalance became impossible to ignore. I was the one who took time off work to drive him to chemo in Cleveland. The one who sat in waiting rooms with a half-warm coffee while Melissa texted me from the house asking if I could pick up groceries on the way back. Mom's tired. Dad knew. I could see it in the way he'd squeeze my hand before the nurses took him back. He'd whisper, "You're the only one I can count on to tell me the truth." The last week before he died, he tried to talk about the will. We were in his hospital room, late at night, the machines beeping soft and steady. "It's in the desk drawer," he told me. "Top left, with the deed." His eyes were glassy but sharp. "Don't let them." He stopped coughing, the kind that rattles all the way through a body. I told him to rest. After the funeral, I went to that desk. The drawer was empty. Melissa said she hadn't been in there. Mom said maybe Dad moved it for safekeeping. And just like that, the conversation ended. Every time I tried to bring it up, they'd change the subject, talk about the weather, the neighbor's new fence, anything but Dad's wishes. It was like the will had never existed. I kept paying the bills, because what else was I supposed to do? Mom was still there, and if the taxes didn't get paid, the county would come for the house. But with every payment I sent, a part of me wondered if I was just feeding a machine designed to keep me in my place, the dependable younger daughter who doesn't ask questions, who just writes checks and stays quiet. And they thought I'd never stop. They thought wrong. Because when I walked into that family meeting and saw the way they avoided my eyes, the way Melissa stood a little taller, chin tilted like a queen about to hand down a sentence I knew, this wasn't about bills or family updates. This was about control. About making sure I stayed in my lane. What they didn't realize? I'd been keeping my own records. Every payment, every email, every voicemail, where Melissa promised, "I'll pay you back next month." I'd been playing the long game without even meaning to. And the minute she told me I wasn't welcome in that house, I decided the long game was over. It happened faster than I expected. We'd been sitting there for almost 20 minutes, me on the love seat, Melissa in Dad's old recliner like she'd inherited it, along with everything else. Mom still knitting like the click of her needles was keeping her from having to speak. Finally, Melissa cleared her throat. "So, we've been thinking about summer plans. Maybe a yard sale. Get rid of some of Dad's old tools. Furniture we don't use. Clean slate, you know?" I leaned forward. "Before we start selling things, can we talk about Dad's will?" Silence. Not the polite kind, not the "we didn't hear you" kind. The heavy, drop a pin and hear it kind. Melissa's eyes flicked to Mom, then back to me. "What about it?" "I haven't seen it," I said, keeping my voice even. "Dad told me where it was, but when I looked, it was gone. We should read it, see what he wanted." Her mouth tightened. "It's complicated." "What's complicated?" "The timing, the paperwork, we're still figuring things out. 6 months isn't enough time to figure out where a piece of paper is." Steve looked up from his phone, smirking like I'd just told a bad joke. Aunt Linda's eyes darted between us. Mom's knitting needles stopped moving, but she didn't look up. Melissa took a slow breath, sat back, and said, "You know what your problem is, Emma? You don't trust anyone." "That's not true. I just want to see—" She cut me off. "You're just here for money. Get out." The words landed like a slap. My first instinct was to laugh because it was so absurd. I'd been sending money to this house for years, money for taxes, repairs, medical bills, and she was accusing me of showing up for money? I looked at Mom. Her eyes stayed fixed on the yellow yarn in her lap. She didn't say a word. Not, "Melissa, stop." Not, "Emma, wait." Nothing. And that was it. That was the moment something inside me clicked into place. Not with anger, not yet, but with a kind of cold, steady clarity. I stood. "Okay," I said. My voice was calm in a way that made Melissa's smile falter. "If that's how you feel, fine. I'll go. But so will my money." Her eyebrows pulled together. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means the payment stopped today. Property tax, utilities, roof repairs. Figure it out yourselves." Steve snorted like he didn't believe me. "Yeah, right. You'll come around." I reached into my bag, pulled out the manila folder I'd brought. It was heavier than it looked, 8 years' worth of proof that I'd been the invisible foundation holding this house up. I set it on the coffee table, the slap of paper against wood breaking the silence. "Every cent I've sent you," I said. "Every bill I've paid. Consider this my receipt and my resignation." Melissa's face went pale, then red. "You can't just—" "I can," I said, "and I am." For a second, nobody moved. Then Aunt Linda stood abruptly and muttered something about needing fresh air. Steve went back to his phone, though his thumbs weren't moving. Mom's knitting needles clicked again, faster this time, but she still didn't look at me. I walked to the front door. My hand was on the knob when Melissa's voice followed me, sharp and cold. "Don't come crawling back when you realize you made a mistake." I turned just enough to meet her eyes. "You first." The winter air outside was biting, but it felt cleaner than the air I'd been breathing inside. I walked to my car, each crunch of snow under my boots making the decision feel more permanent. By the time I slid into the driver's seat, I knew there was no going back. The engine turned over, the heater coughing to life. My hands were steady on the wheel. No tears, no second thoughts. Just the quiet satisfaction of finally dropping a weight I should have set down years ago. As I pulled away from the house, I caught one last glimpse in the rearview mirror. Melissa standing in the doorway, arms crossed, trying to look victorious. But even from that distance, I could see the flicker of something else in her eyes. It wasn't victory, it was worry. She didn't know it yet, but she'd just pulled the one thread holding her little empire together, and in a matter of days, it was going to unravel right in her hands. The first thing I did when I got back to my apartment in Columbus was sit at my kitchen table, open my laptop, and log into my bank account. For years, I'd had 2 recurring transfers set up. One to Mom's checking account, another directly to the county tax office for the house. Automatic, first of every month. I didn't even think about it anymore, it just happened. Like gravity. Not this month. I clicked cancel recurring payment on both. A little pop-up asked, "Are you sure you want to stop this transfer?" Yes, I was sure. My finger hovered for half a second, then I hit confirm. It was done. A weird kind of silence settled over me, like the moment the power goes out and you realize how much background noise you've been living with. For the first time in years, my money was mine. But I knew Melissa. I knew she wouldn't just let it go. She'd try to guilt me, scare me, maybe even threaten me with, "Mom's gonna lose the house and it'll be your fault." I'd heard every variation of that script before, so I decided to prepare. I went to my bedroom closet, pulled down the storage bin labeled taxes and bills, and dumped it on the bed. Manila envelopes, receipts, old check stubs, a decade of my life in paper form. I started sorting. Property tax receipts in one pile, utility bills I'd paid in another, then the bigger stuff. The $3,200 roof repair after the hailstorm, the $1,800 furnace replacement in 2018, the $600 I sent last year for Mom's dental work. Every payment had a date, a dollar amount, and in some cases a note from Melissa promising she'd cover me next month. She never did. I scanned everything into PDFs and backed them up to a secure cloud folder, labeled each file with the date and what it was for. If this turned into a legal fight, I'd be ready. Then I went through my phone. Dozens of voicemails and text threads, Melissa asking for a quick loan, Mom explaining how this is just temporary, Steve straight up sending me bank account numbers to deposit money into. I downloaded every single one. While I worked, the emotions came in waves. Relief, mostly like finally cutting off an IV line that had been draining me for years, but also this low hum of anxiety in the back of my mind. What if they showed up at my door? What if mom called crying? What if, deep down, I was still the kind of person who couldn't stand to see them fall apart no matter how much they deserved it? I shook the thought off and kept working. By midnight, I had a neatly organized folder labeled Family Financial Records and a flash drive tucked into my desk. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the couch, staring at my phone on the coffee table. Nothing. No missed calls, no angry texts, just silence. It felt strange and good and terrifying. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Not because I was ready to sue, not yet, but because I wanted to know my rights. I explained the situation, the missing will, the years of financial support, the sudden eviction from the family. He listened, then said, "Keep everything you've collected, and don't send them another cent. If there's no will filed with probate, we can petition to open an investigation." The word investigation made my stomach twist, but it also lit a small fire in my chest. I'd spent years avoiding confrontation, telling myself it was easier to just pay and keep the peace. But what peace? All I'd done was finance my own exclusion. By the end of the day, I'd changed the locks on my own apartment just in case Melissa decided to drop by. I'd blocked Steve's number and muted Mom's, because I knew she'd be the first to call when Melissa needed an emotional battering ram. That night, I slept better than I had in months. No buzzing phone on the nightstand. No mental math about how much I could spare this paycheck. Just key it. But underneath it, a pulse of anticipation. Because I knew the silence wouldn't last. It didn't take long. 3 days after I killed the autopay, my phone lit up at 2:17 a.m. The screen glowed in the dark bedroom, Melissa's name flashing like an alarm. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. Let it go to voicemail, let her stew. But curiosity and maybe a little bit of spite got the better of me. I swiped to answer. Her voice was shaky, words tumbling over each other. "Emma, we can't pay the property tax. They're going to put a lien on the house." There it was. No hello, no small talk. Just straight to the point, or rather, the problem she'd been trying to avoid. I sat up in bed, switched on the lamp. "So?" Her breath caught. "What do you mean so? This is serious. If they put a lien, they'll put a lien," I said, cutting her off. "And maybe that's what it takes for you to understand what I've been covering for the last 8 years. She sucked in a breath, like she hadn't expected me to say it out loud. "This isn't about you. This is about Mom." "No," I said, my voice flat. "This is about you and Steve living in that house rent-free while I've been paying for it like some kind of ghost landlord." There was a pause, and then the crying started. The messy, heaving sobs that used to work on me like a switch flip it, and I'd cave. I'd send the money, tell myself I was helping, and then hate myself for it later. "You're tearing this family apart," she said between gasps. I almost laughed. "Number, I'm just stopping the part where I'm the only one holding it together." She tried a different tactic. If Dad were here, he'd tell you to get a job and pay your own bills," I snapped. "And don't pretend you don't know it." The sobs turned into silence. The kind of silence where you can hear someone breathing, calculating their next move. "You'll regret this," she said finally, her voice low and tight. "No," I said. "I regret not doing it sooner." "You don't understand what you're doing to Mom." "What I understand," I interrupted, "is that you've been using her as a shield. Anytime I ask a real question, you hide behind her. But this isn't about Mom's well-being. This is about you keeping control." That landed. I could tell because her breathing hitched, like she wanted to deny it but couldn't find the words. "You always think you're better than me," she said, her voice cracking now. "Just because you have a job, just because you live in the city." "This has nothing to do with being better," I said. "It has everything to do with being responsible. And you've avoided that for so long you don't even know what it looks like anymore." There was another long pause. Then she went for the last card she had left. "Fine. But when Mom has to move out, when she's crying because she lost the house, I hope you can sleep at night." I leaned back against the headboard, my voice calm and steady. "I'll sleep just fine, because I've done more than my share. I've given more than I could afford. And if you cared about her as much as you say you do, you'd be figuring out a way to fix this instead of calling me at 2 in the morning." Dead silence. I could almost hear the hum of the phone line between us. Finally, she muttered something under her breath, maybe a curse, Maybe just a sound of frustration, and hung up. The screen went dark. The room was still again, but the air felt different, lighter. I put the phone on the nightstand and just sat there, letting the quiet settle in. My heart was pounding, but not from fear. From something else. Something that felt dangerously close to freedom. For years, I'd been waiting for the right moment to break the cycle. Turns out, the right moment wasn't some big dramatic event. It was a choice. A simple, clean choice to stop being the one holding everything together while everyone else took it for granted. That call was the last time Melissa's number ever lit up my phone. And as I turned off the lamp and lay back down, I realized something. The loop was broken. For good. The morning after that last call, I woke up to sunlight pouring across my kitchen table. My phone was quiet. No missed calls. No guilt-tripping voicemails. Just silence. It felt unreal. I made coffee, sat down, and pulled up the folder I'd built 8 years of bank transfers, receipts, texts, voicemails, every dollar, every lie. Every just this once that turned into a pattern. By noon, I was in my lawyer's office. He slid the folder toward himself like it was an evidence exhibit in court. "This is more than enough," he said. "We'll file a petition to reopen the estate and request an accounting. If the will was destroyed or hidden, that's a crime." Hearing the word crime didn't shock me. It just confirmed what I'd been feeling since Dad's funeral, that all the complicated paperwork Melissa talked about was really just a cover for keeping control. When I left his office, the winter air didn't sting the way it had outside Mom's house that day. It felt sharp in a good way, like breathing in after you've been underwater too long. The next few weeks, I started making choices for myself. Choices I didn't have to explain or justify to anyone. I stopped looking at rental listings and started browsing houses. The kind with porches that didn't sag and kitchens big enough to cook in without bumping elbows with anyone. One afternoon, I found a 2-bedroom cottage near a quiet lake, with tall pines out back and enough space for a small garden. I put in an offer the next day. When the keys hit my palm, I realized something. For the first time in my adult life, my money was building my future, not holding up someone else's. I furnished the place slowly, a thrifted leather armchair, a bookshelf I built myself, a quilt Mom had made back before Melissa decided she needed to manage her time. Every item had a story that belonged to me. And the more I settled in, the less I thought about whether Melissa had found another ATM, whether the house on Pine Street had a lien notice taped to the door, whether Mom finally understood why I'd walked away. Because it wasn't my problem anymore. One evening, sitting by the lake with a mug of tea, I thought about Dad. About the way he'd look at me when he said, "You're the only one I can count on to do the right thing." I used to think that meant taking care of everyone else, no matter what it cost me. Now I understood it meant something else. Taking care of myself enough to stop enabling the worst parts of the people I loved. I thought I'd lose my family if I stopped paying. Turns out, the only thing I lost was the chain they kept around my neck. And the best part? I could breathe again. If you've ever had to walk away from a toxic family tie, subscribe you're not alone. There's a whole world waiting for you on the other side of that decision. And trust me, it's worth it.